Ever imagine just wanting to escape everything and head to like your own peaceful little hideaway,
Oh, yeah.
a cabin in the woods or by the beach? Well, today we're going to dive deep into George Washington, the man who basically felt that way while being the first president of the brand new United States.
Wow.
And to add to that, we're going to contrast his journey with what happened to Louis XVI over in France.
Right.
And to guide us on this journey, we'll be using excerpts from the podcast History That Doesn't Suck.
Sounds good.
I think it's super interesting to compare these two. I mean, just think about how much pressure Washington had to have felt. He was literally creating a country from scratch.
Yeah. He was making a blueprint for something that had never existed before.
Right. And the crazy thing is this guy who led armies, and basically everyone looked up to him. I didn't even really want to be president.
Really?
The podcast talks about how much he just wanted to be back at Mount Vernon, living the quiet life. Yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, it'd be nice to be home. It was like a real struggle between what he wanted and what he felt he had to do.
I can see that.
Even his family said he was happiest in those years before he got elected.
Interesting. You know, it makes you think about what a lot of leaders go through,
Yeah,
trying to balance their own life with serving others.
for sure. So he accepts this huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And the podcast really makes you feel like you're there at his inauguration, dressed in a fancy American-made suit, like a symbol of the whole country's hopes.
Oh, wow.
But underneath it all, you get this feeling of uneasiness.
Like he's carrying the weight of the entire nation.
Exactly. I mean, this is a guy who risked his life for independence, and now he has this whole other battle to fight, creating this fragile new republic.
Yeah. It all depended on what he did.
And on top of all of that, he's dealing with all these big personalities with completely different ideas about what the country should be. We can't talk about Washington without talking about Hamilton and Jefferson.
Oh, actually.
This is where it gets juicy. Washington could see things from different sides. He could handle these two brilliant but totally opposite guys.
Right.
So you have Hamilton, this ambitious, self-made immigrant who wants a strong government, a total visionary who set the stage for America to become powerful.
Kind of on the other side?
Then you have Jefferson, the philosopher who wants a simple farming society and the government to stay out of everything.
Total opposites. How did Washington even keep them both happy?
That's the mark of a great leader, right?
Yeah.
He could take these opposite ideas and find a way to do what was best for everyone, even if it meant making tough choices.
Tough choices like.
So take the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yes.
This is where Washington, who just wanted to be peaceful, has to put together the biggest army of his entire life to fight his own people.
Wow.
Yeah, think about that. Leading an army against the very people you fought to free, all because of a tax on whiskey.
It really shows you how important a strong government was to him.
Absolutely. Even if it made him unpopular, he did what he thought the country needed to survive. And that brings us to something else really important about Washington. He was willing to change and adapt.
Like how?
Well, look at his views on slavery. This was a complicated issue that made him really look at his own morals.
Right.
And it even caused some people in Virginia to turn against him.
It must have been a difficult thing to deal with.
It was. And then there's him choosing Hamilton, an immigrant, as a close advisor.
A bold move for sure.
It didn't make everyone happy,
Yeah.
but it shows how much he valued talent over where someone came from. It's like he knew being a leader isn't about being stuck in your ways, but about learning and changing with the times.
We could all learn a lot from that.
Couldn't agree more. And it makes it even more interesting when we look at what happened to Louis XVI, who was dealing with a whole different kind of revolution.
Oh, yeah. And the French Revolution was just crazy. So much change and chaos. Totally different from what happened in America.
I know. The podcast really makes you feel how wild it got. With the guillotine and everything, it's kind of scary to think about.
It makes you realize that revolutions can get out of control, even when they start with good intentions.
Right. Like, look at what happened to Danton. He was all for the revolution at first, but then he got executed too.
It shows how dangerous things can get when people get caught up in ideology and mob mentality.
It's a good reminder that there's a fine line between believing in something and becoming a fanatic. How can a movement that's supposed to be about freedom end up with so much bloodshed?
That's the question, isn't it? I think the podcast makes a good point about how the French Revolution wasn't just about fixing problems. It was about destroying everything and starting over.
So it was way more extreme than the American Revolution.
Exactly. And without someone like Washington to keep everyone together and lead the country through those tough times, things got out of hand.
And then there's poor Louis XVI. He just wasn't ready for what was coming.
His execution is the total opposite of what happened to Washington. Washington died peacefully from illness.
And he left a legacy of stability and a plan for democracy.
But Louis, well, he became a victim of the very revolution he couldn't handle.
It's pretty emotional listening to the podcast describe those last moments. Washington surrounded by his family, accepting his death with dignity, and Louis facing the guillotine.
It's heavy stuff. And then you have Louis' son, Louis Charles. He was just a kid,
I know.
imprisoned and mistreated after his dad's execution, died when he was only 10 years old.
It's just so sad. A reminder that even when people are fighting for good things, innocent people can get hurt.
It really makes you think about the cost of freedom and who ends up paying for it.
And how do we make sure that revolutions don't turn into cycles of violence? These are questions we still deal with today when we see people fighting for freedom all over the world.
Definitely. It reminds us that history isn't just something in the past. It still affects us today.
It does. So what can we learn from these two guys? Washington, the practical leader who could adapt, and Louis XVI, who met a tragic end.
I think it all comes down to leadership. Washington shows us how important it is to be able to change, to bring people together and put the needs of others first.
And Louis is an example of what can happen when you're stuck in the past and can't adapt to change.
It's a reminder that real leadership isn't about having power. It's about understanding the people you lead and being able to handle whatever challenges come up.
It's about being strong and believing in something, but also being humble and willing to learn. We've talked a lot about how important it is to adapt. Washington just seemed to get it. Change happens and you got to be ready for it, whether you're leading a country or just a team at work.
Yeah, and it's not just about politics either. Look at his personal life. He wanted to be at Mount Vernon, but he took on this huge job as president.
He put the country first.
Yeah.
Even if it meant giving up what he really wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And being a leader often means making tough choices like that. Sacrifices.
It makes you wonder what would happen if Louis XVI had been more like that.
Right. Could he have changed things? Maybe even avoided his fate?
Who knows?
Yeah.
But it does make you think about how important it is to be flexible.
It's not just about reacting to things, though. It's about having the right mindset.
Being willing to question things and look at things from different angles.
And it's something we can all apply to our own lives.
Absolutely. I mean, we're not leading countries, but we all face challenges.
All the time. The world changes so fast. Technology, jobs, everything. You've got to be able to adapt.
So what did we learn from Washington today?
I think the big takeaway is to embrace change. Be open to learning and growing.
And remember that real leadership isn't about being stubborn.
It's about being wise enough to change with the times.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today.
Thanks for joining us.
If you enjoyed this, look at these two very different leaders and what we can learn from them. Be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more explorations of history and the ideas that shape our world.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep adapting.